Now that is just too long for me, said no girl ever to the guy recording this video. Hey folks, we are back with another video, and today we're going to be working on a steer tube. So a few months back I had posted a full service video for this particular fork. One of the reasons I serviced it was I had a significant scratch in one of the stanchions of the upper assembly, and I happened to find a new one for a really good price. So I decided to swap it. I will end up fixing this. I might create a video about fixing scratches like this, but the reality is this when it comes to these type of scratches. If it's deep and oil's coming out, that means dirt could go in. In fact, in that video where I serviced the fork, you could see how clean the foam ring was, because the reality is it did not have that many hours on it, this particular fork at that time. But yet where this scratch was, it was super dark compared to the rest of the foam ring, right? So oil was coming out, but dirt was also going in. Now, this scratch happened to be in the middle of my travel, which is, in my opinion, the worst spot you could get scratches, especially vertical scratches, because oils kind of constantly want to come out. Ultimately, any dust in the air is going to stick to it, and when the wiper constantly goes over it, it's just going to pull that dirt in, as could be seen in the foam ring in the video, right? So these are repairable, but they can be tricky depending on how deep they are. If the scratches are near the top, most people, I would say, rarely use, I'd say not even 5% of the time, if not less than that, actually make it to the top of their travel. So it's not as worrisome, but when it's in the middle or the lower part of your travel, you definitely want to deal with it before you actually destroy your lower boots, right? And the uppers, I mean, when you look around, you could come across decent prices for them, real good prices sometimes, and just get the job done. And this way, you know, your fork will be in tip-top shape. So now that I had replaced the upper, what I need to do is cut down the steer tube, put it in a new race. I'll also go over removing a race, even though I won't be using this one. I'll just fix this fork and leave this race, put this race back on, and use this as a spare in case one day I destroy this one. So that's what this video is going to be about. Hopefully it'll be a relatively quick video because there's not that much to do, all right? So next, let's go to some tools that would be needed in order to get this job done. I'm going to start off by saying that my recommendation for this type of job is just go to your local bike shop and have them do it. For 99% of you, it's not worth buying any of these tools or building your own tools to get any of this job done, okay? Bike shops don't charge all that much, at least they shouldn't charge all that much. And how many times are you going to do it in your lifetime in order to justify the cost of these tools? If you're a hobbyist and you want to get more into bike service, then yeah, sure, why not? You know what I mean? I mean, you could either buy them or you could build some of them on your own, which I will go over as well. First, we're going to start off with the crown race removal, right? There's two types of crown races. You got your split crown race and your full ring crown race. The split ones are a lot easier to remove. Basically, you could do it with a flat screwdriver or a pick. Once you get one little section of it off, the rest will come off real easy. I'm not a big fan of the split ones. Personally, I don't think any of them protect bearings all that well, especially if you live in muddy or dusty environments. I'm a huge fan of these, in particular this Cane Creek 110. I've been using it for the better part of a decade on all my bikes and many other bikes, and these things really do protect that bottom bearing in a very big way. So that's just my preference. Ultimately, removing these is more complicated. There's two ways you could do it. One I would consider the right way, by using a professional tool. Another way is what I would consider the wrong way, by using a screwdriver, right? You technically can take a screwdriver and tap it underneath and try and remove it. I'll just about guarantee that you will do damage or mar your crown up here. This is a very soft metal when compared to hard steel. I wouldn't do it. You could also, if you wanted to remove the race itself and reuse it by using a screwdriver, you could actually damage the race itself. You could put a little warp in it without even realizing it, right? So don't recommend using a screwdriver. Ultimately, one of these tools, this particular tool in here, is the best tool you could use for the job. It definitely pulls it out without any issues, but it's very expensive. Most of you guys aren't going to have it. There are miniature versions of this tool where it's just the blades on the bottom that you put over. I don't happen to have one. I've used them in the past a long time ago. They're hit and miss as well, in my opinion. So, but if you're very careful with them, they'll be better than using a screwdriver for sure, all right? For cutting the steer tube, there's a few tools you're gonna need over here. One of them, some kind of measuring tape, preferably a millimeter so you can be more precise in order to measure the length of tube you need to cut, right? And then something to scratch the tube that'll make it nice and clear, but not too thick so you can be relatively precise when it comes down to cutting it, right? Now, when it comes to actual cutting the tube, you have two options. You can technically use a pipe wrench. When it comes to pipe wrench cutters though, you have to be careful. These things do take some getting used to, and the cuts on this need to be relatively precise. If you're off by a little bit with one of these things, you can end up cutting on an angle without even realizing it, right? And it's just gonna make life a little bit more difficult for you down the road. In my opinion, the best overall tool is to get some kind of guide, okay? Now there's multiple guides out there. I just happen to have this one, which you can use for metal steer tubes or carbon steer tubes or handlebars, so on and so forth, right? And a hacksaw blade, whether one for regular metal or one for carbon. Now the one thing with hacksaw blades, always make sure to install the teeth facing forward, okay? So make sure you got that. So those are your two options when it comes to the actual cutting. And then it's a question of deburring, right? Any smoothing out the metal. Now this is a deburring tool where you could do the inside of the steer tube and the outside of the steer tube, or you could just use a file or sandpaper, anything to just soften it up. For installing a race, there's multiple options here. So this is an actual race install tool, and usually it'll work with some kind of adapter that is made for an actual race. So again, this is a Cane Creek 110. There is a specific adapter to use with this tool in order to install a Cane Creek 110. This has 2 layers of seals on it, and this particular version of adapter protects the seals, so it only hits on the metal part. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't use an adapter on a race that will damage the race, okay? Now these are just very old races I happen to find to bring out here. I mean, these are very, very old. But ultimately, you can build your own tool out of 1.5 inch PVC pipe, okay? In fact, I've used that in the past and it works pretty good. You're gonna need a hammer. Technically this side, I just didn't want to make it too loud, in order to install the race back onto the steer. Now, to install the star nut, this is one of those Park Tool tools that is an outstanding tool. This guy is by far the most solid tool I've ever come across, but you don't need to get a professional tool like this. You could literally use an M5 screw, right? Or an M5 bolt, I should say, that goes in here, and then you can just tap it into the right depth, which is, I'd say, is about, what is that, 3/4 of an inch, I think, something like that. But again, go to your local bike shop to get all this stuff done. Unless you're a hobbyist, unless you want to get into servicing bikes, you don't need to get into any of this stuff. All right, so now let's just get the job done nice and quick. We'll be back. First, we start off with measuring the old steer tube, all right? And we do that from the top of the crown underneath the race itself, okay? So use a millimeter measuring tape if you can. Right now I'm at 204 millimeters. So I like leaving extra space on my steer tubes. It actually helps with resale value. If you cut them too short, if you cut them perfectly to fit your particular bike, you could limit the amount of people that are able to buy it, basically. It'll be too short for them, right? So I like leaving it 200, a little bit more than 200 sometimes. It just gives it more flexibility when it comes to potentially reselling it down the road. So now that we know it's 204 millimeters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the measuring tape, put it against this guy here. Now that's the only thing. That's the world's worst measuring tape. I'm going to grab, make sure he's even. My good ones are at another place. And we are going to make a mark at 204. A very sharp pick comes in really handy over here. And there you go. Boom, right there. All right. Now we take them and we set them up to be cut. To cut them, I'm going to use this guide. You have 2 sides, right? You have 2 slits over here. One of them is for a regular hacksaw blade. The other one is for a carbon blade, the wider one, basically. The carbon blades to cut either carbon steer tubes or carbon handlebars. Now, when it comes to carbon, if you ever cut carbon with a blade or cut carbon in general, absolutely always wear a mask. There is nothing out there that states that carbon is safe when you cut it to breathe in. There will be particulates floating around in the air, unlike metal, which is heavy. Carbon is very light. The dust particles are extremely light, and they will float around and they will get in your lungs, and ultimately it could end up causing you some serious problems down the road, right? So again, when you're cutting carbon, always make sure you wear a very good mask. With metal, we don't have to worry about that much. Metal's much heavier. Dust immediately falls down. It doesn't just float in the air. So we're going to take our blade. We're going to use the thin side. We're going to put in the vise, and we are going to lock it down. As I mentioned, you are going to need a vise for this, okay? So then on the inside over here, we have essentially a mount that's adjustable. That is our marking, and what we are going to try and do is line up the mark on the thin line over here. All right, where are you? Just about there. Actually, a little bit off. Now we are going to test that before we tighten it down. We're going to put our saw blade on here, and I am off by a bit. There we go, right there. All right, tighten them down. Now remember, when you tighten them down, this thing shifts, so we're going to try them one last time, just to make sure we are on the mark. And I am on the mark, without a doubt. All right, make sure he is tight. And we are good to go, okay? Now, when it comes to sawing metal with a hacksaw, I was taught this when I was a kid. Don't put pressure both ways. Teeth facing forward, you're gonna put a little pressure forward, let the saw do the work, and put no pressure coming back, right? So you just want slow, methodical movements. Do not try and force it down. This is not wood, don't rush it. The more you rush it, the worse the cut. Actually, you could even create a bit of a crooked cut. So ultimately, you just want the blade to do its job, right? So we're just gonna go forward and back, just like that. I'm barely putting any pressure forward. I'm putting zero pressure when pulling back. Now, when it comes to the last bit, don't force it down. Just lightly go through it and let the blade cut all of it in order to not leave a large burr. Just take your time over here. You could actually hear the metal, the tune of the metal as you're getting to the end. Again, don't force it down. Let it all fall out on its own. All right. Okay, we're going to grab our vacuum. We're going to vacuum up all the shavings on the inside of the tube and all the way around so we don't make a big mess. We're done cutting. We are going to remove the fork. All right. We're going to take a wet or damp cloth for now and just clean the shavings off. Now, word of caution to those out there that also service shocks or droppers using the vise. There's still going to be small metal bits on your vise. Grab a damp cloth, wipe them all off. The last thing you want is some of these shavings to somehow accidentally fall into a shock or a dropper while servicing it using the same vise you just used. We cut it. Now let's measure it to make sure that we were accurate. And I am at 204 millimeters. Perfect. Now we do burred. Again, you could use a sandpaper, you could use a file, a rock. I have this deburring tool. Basically, I just put it in the middle, turn it a few times, put it on the outside. And there you go. Grab a damp towel. Put your finger around it, should be perfectly smooth, just like it is. All right. One thing that's a good thing to do, in my opinion, is clean the inside of the tube, right? So we use the vacuum on it, but the vacuum is not going to get all that metal. Some of the metal will magnetically stick on the sides. Just grab anything that's somewhat abrasive and large and basically just go in and out. The last thing we want is some of those metal filings that might be stuck in here to come out and get stuck on the actual stanchions. The next thing you know, it's going to be in your wipers, and that causes problems, right? So this is just some added insurance, just to see what I mean. Look at all that just came out. So very hard to see, very hard to control. Okay. Then ultimately, the best is grab a damp towel, stick it in there, and just force it all the way through. Grab anything you can. It's long enough. Hopefully this long. It's not going to be long enough. Yes, it is going to be long enough to force it through. Now we take a look inside. Make sure she's clean. Oh, spotless. Cool. All that extra metal was inside, even though we vacuumed it. We took it out. This way we limit the chances of any metal shavings getting stuck on the stanchions. Okay. Next, we install the crown race. Now this is a Cane Creek 110 race. Outstanding race in my opinion. It has two seals, one for the outer part of the bearing, one for the inner part of the bearing. These really do an amazing job from stopping dirt from getting into the bearings, but they do require a unique adapter, a bearing set, race setting adapter, okay? Because if you use any regular old flat one, you will crush the seals, whereas this one has sort of a bevel, which sits inside it, just like that, okay? So I'm gonna take this guy, I'm gonna put him in just like that, and then we take our tool to smash him in there. Now this can be an odd, I'm gonna try and do my best over here. Usually you should be doing this guy vertically. I'm gonna do him on a bit of an angle, right? And then all we're gonna do is tap him. 2 or 3 taps should do it. Oops, I'm gonna do him vertically quick. Just make my life easier over here, but he's nearly done. All right. And he is in. There's absolutely no space between the race and the actual crown itself. So this guy is good to go. Next up, the star nut. Now, before I put the star nut in, I just want to emphasize how important it is to use a proper tool. Don't try and knock this in or punch this in with, with a punch or a hammer. At a minimum, go by a 1.5 inch PVC pipe, something that's nice and soft. You don't want to use anything hard on this that doesn't evenly put pressure down to get them in there. Next, let's put in the star nut. Now this is a dedicated star nut tool, right? So you could use just a regular M5 bolt to get it in there. And the tip would have to be about a 1/2 inch, I believe it is, from the top of the steer tube, right? But in this case, what I do is I take the star nut, right, it's the wrong way, and screw them in all the way to the base. All right. Now the way this works, put them on top, he sinks in, and as you see, he sticks out, right? And ultimately what I do is I grab a hammer, put my hammer on the side. Again, I'm in an odd position over here. Okay, and I take them, tap them in until I can't tap them out anymore. And I just unscrew them. Ta-da! Our star nut is in. So now we have to clean them one last time. Again, because we jammed in a star nut, it created metal shavings, right? So we want to be able to go in here and clean out all the metal shavings from inside, okay? And ultimately, first let's start off with the outside up here. Make sure you use a damp towel for this. Okay. Now let's go on the inside. Try and get out as much as you can. All right. Let's give them a couple of taps. Nothing. We are good. As I mentioned, for most people, if you want to remove the crown race, your best bet to do it right and to do it safe is to just bring it to your local bike shop. They might even do it for free. Maybe they'll charge you $5–10, right? It's not going to be expensive, but they will have a tool like this. I'm pretty sure that if they don't have a tool like this, then I'd question that bike shop and I'd go to another one. This tool over here is a very custom tool, and when it comes to certain custom bike tools, I got to admit Park Tools does a really good job. So the way this thing works, one, it works best on a bike stand, but I'm going to do it on a table over here. You could do it both ways. The way it works, one, you want to create a triangular shape, and to do that you will need a 4mm Allen. These are the bolts that allow you to, give you an idea, move these guys around, right? So you want to create a triangular shape as close as possible to a triangle in order to get even pressure all the way around, right? Then these bolts over here slide grabbers, whatever you want to call them, in and out. And you want to bring them out until they're flush to start with. So mine are all flush. So then I want to make sure that the back end is unscrewed, at least enough where the steering column, the steer post will go in, right? So let's put it on his side. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to put him in. Now, these little knives, they go underneath the crown race. And the whole idea is to get them underneath equally, all the way around, right? And tighten them. Just like that. So this way, I'm not touching the actual crown. Well, I'm just barely touching the actual crown, but we're going to be lifting up. There's not going to be any pressure on the crown. Okay? So once I'm comfortable that I have my centered, yes, these guys in place, tighten them down. Okay. They look even all the way around. Now, I should be able to, you see it? Screw this guy in. There we go. And, yep, he's in frame. And if you notice, he is pulling up the race. Nice and smooth. No need to go crazy on this thing. You will hear a pop when he snaps off. Right about there. And that's it. There is our race. Nice and separated. No marks, nothing, right? So if you ever want to change a race on your steer, again, this is the way to do it. Like I said, they sell these little tools. I've tried them before, and they can make a real, sometimes they're flawless, but they're very inconsistent. Other times they will make such a mess. This is actually softer than you think, this metal. It definitely scores easily, it scratches easily, it dents easily. So the other tools, like I said, when they don't go right, they go wrong real quick and real bad, right? As far as using a screwdriver, sure, you can save yourself a couple of bucks. Use a flathead screwdriver and try and pry it out. I don't think it's worth it. You will absolutely do damage to your crown. Again, personally, your best bet, go to your local bike shop, have them do it, and you'll be good to go, all right? Ta-da! We are done, folks. We have shortened the steer tube, added a new crown race, put in a star nut, and we are ready to put this fork back on a bike. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, personally, just go to a local bike shop and get this done. Unless you want to get into servicing bikes, there's no need for you to go through all this or to have to buy any kind of tools in order to get this job done. They don't charge all that much. In some cases, they might not even charge you. If they don't, just make sure you buy something of significance within the shop. I mean, let's try and support these guys whenever we can. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button to see more videos. Click the bell button, bing, 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 in order to get notified when new videos get released. And there will be videos being released. I'm not going anywhere. I know there's been a pretty large gap since my last video, but ultimately some of that was totally out of my control, to say the least. We've been going through some crazy stuff lately, all right? So new videos will be coming. And until then, I hope all is well with everyone, and we will be talking to you soon. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.